The Hunted. The escape pod tore through the atmosphere of Meridian 9, trailing fire and debris as it plummeted toward the dense forest below. Inside, Lieutenant Commander Lyra Novick gripped the manual controls, her knuckles white with tension. Blood trickled from a gash above her eye, but she didn't dare release her grip to wipe it away. Not when every second counted. "Come on, you piece of junk," she muttered through gritted teeth. The pod systems were failing one by one, each accompanied by a shrill alarm that pierced her ears. The Empire had gotten lucky with that last shot. Lucky enough to cripple her ship, but not lucky enough to kill her. Not yet. The ground rushed up to meet her, a chaotic blur of emerald and shadow. Lyra pulled back on the controls with all her strength, forcing the dying pod to level out just enough to prevent instant death upon impact. The vessel skimmed treetops, ripping through branches and canopy before slamming into the forest floor. Metal screamed as it tore apart, and Lyra's world became a kaleidoscope of pain and noise. Then silence. She awoke to the hiss of escaping coolant and the distant call of alien wildlife. Every breath sent daggers through her ribs, but a quick self-assessment confirmed nothing was broken beyond repair. The crash harness had done its job, mostly. Lyra unclipped herself and fell forward onto her hands and knees, coughing as acrid smoke filled the pod's cabin. "Priority 1, get moving," she whispered to herself. The Empire wouldn't waste time. They'd have pinpointed her crash site already, and dropships would be inbound. Lyra pulled herself to her feet and limped to the emergency locker. The biometric scanner recognized her palm print, and the locker hissed open to reveal her survival kit. A compact blaster, medkit, canteen, and the small obsidian cube that was her true mission objective. She stuffed everything into her tactical vest pockets, drawing comfort from the familiar weight of the equipment. As she worked, her mind drifted back to her training. To the cabin in the woods on Earth, so far from Imperial space. To the old woman with eyes that seemed to hold the depths of the universe within them. "They will hunt you, little wolf," the old woman had said, her accent thick with centuries of Earth's history that few remembered. "They will hunt you because they fear what you carry. Not just here." She had tapped Lyra's pack, where the obsidian cube now rested. But here, her gnarled finger had pressed against Lyra's forehead. "I remember," Lyra whispered to the memory. "Never stop moving. Never fight unless cornered. The shadows are my allies." She slipped out of the ruined pod into the alien forest. The trees of Meridian 9 grew tall and slender, their bark a deep purple that almost appeared black in the fading daylight. Luminescent fungi dotted the underbrush, casting an eerie blue glow that would make hiding difficult once night fell completely. Lyra moved quickly but carefully, placing each step with deliberate precision. Another lesson from her mentor. The earth does not betray those who respect it. The old woman had taught her. The same is true of all worlds. Listen to the forest, and it will guide you. She had barely covered a kilometer when she heard the first Imperial dropship overhead. Its engines roared as it hovered above the crash site. Lyra pressed herself against the trunk of a massive tree, her breathing shallow and controlled. Through the canopy, she could make out the bright spotlights sweeping the forest floor. "Find the human," came a voice amplified by speakers. "Lord Commander Vex wants her alive if possible, dead if necessary. The artifact must be recovered intact." Lyra allowed herself a grim smile. They were afraid. The Empire, which controlled 3/4 of the known galaxy, was afraid of one human woman and the small cube she carried. They should be. "Sir, we've detected traces of human blood leading northwest from the crash site," reported the scout trooper, his white armor gleaming under the dropship's lights. Lord Commander Vex nodded, his expression hidden behind his ornate battle helmet. The helmet, like all his armor, was crafted from rare metals mined from the heart of dying stars, a privilege reserved for the highest-ranking officers of the Galactic Empire. "Deploy the hounds," he ordered. "I want a perimeter established 5 kilometers out. Nothing gets through." The trooper saluted and hurried to relay the orders. Vex turned his attention back to the burning wreckage of the escape pod. Intelligence had identified the pilot as Lieutenant Commander Lyra Novak, one of the few remaining military officers from Earth's now-defunct resistance. But her file contained disturbing gaps. Years where she had simply disappeared from all records, only to resurface with skills that seemed impossible for a standard human. And then there was the artifact she had stolen from the Imperial Vault on Centauri Prime. The obsidian cube was ancient, predating the Empire itself, its purpose unknown even to the Imperial scholars. But the Emperor had been explicit. The cube must be recovered, and the thief made an example of. "My lord," called one of his officers. "The hounds have picked up her scent." Vex nodded. "Release them." Lyra heard the hounds before she saw them, genetically engineered predators with enhanced senses and relentless stamina. Their howls echoed through the forest, sending chills down her spine. She quickened her pace, ignoring the pain that flared with each step. The forest grew denser as she pushed deeper, the strange trees clustering together until they'd formed nearly impenetrable walls of vegetation. It slowed her progress but would also hamper her pursuers. As she paused to catch her breath, another memory surfaced. "When they corner you, and they will corner you, little wolf, remember that you have claws of your own." The old woman had taken Lyra's hands in her own, turning them palm up. With a fingernail that seemed more like a talon, she had traced lines across Lyra's palms until they bled. The pain had been excruciating, but Lyra hadn't cried out. "Pain is the path to power," her mentor had whispered. "Blood is the key that unlocks doors between worlds." The sound of snapping branches jerked Lyra back to the present. The hounds were close, too close. She broke into a run, abandoning stealth for speed. The forest blurred around her as she pushed her body to its limits. A clearing appeared ahead, bathed in the silver light of Meridian 9's 3 moons. Lyra hesitated at the edge. Crossing open ground was dangerous, but doubling back would lead her straight into the Empire's forces. She took a deep breath and sprinted across the clearing. She had almost reached the far side when the ground beneath her feet shifted. Too late, she realized her mistake. What had appeared to be solid ground was actually a natural sinkhole covered by a thin layer of vegetation and soil. Lyra plunged downward, a scream trapped in her throat as she fell into darkness. "The trace ends here, sir," reported the scout, gesturing to the edge of the sinkhole. "The hounds are circling but won't go near it." Lord Commander Vex approached cautiously, activating the enhanced vision in his helmet. The sinkhole dropped nearly 30 meters into a network of caves below. If the human had survived the fall, she would be trapped. "Set up perimeter sensors," he ordered. "If she's alive down there, she'll have to come out eventually. And prepare my descent gear." "Sir." The trooper sounded alarmed. "Protocol dictates we should send drones first." "The artifact is too important to leave to drones," Vex replied coldly. "I will retrieve it personally." As his troops rushed to obey, Vex stared into the darkness below. Something didn't feel right. The human's escape, the crash, the convenient sinkhole, it all seemed too orchestrated, almost as if they were being led into a trap. He dismissed the thought. What trap could one injured human possibly set for an Imperial strike force? Lyra lay on her back, staring up at the distant circle of moonlight above. The fall should have killed her, or at least broken most of her bones. Instead, she had landed on a bed of soft, moss-like growth that covered the cave floor. It wasn't luck. Another lesson from her mentor. "The Earth Mother will catch you if you know how to ask," the old woman had said. "All worlds have a consciousness. Learn to speak to them, and they will aid you." During the descent, Lyra had pressed her bleeding palm against the cube in her pocket, whispering words in a language far older than humanity's time among the stars, words taught to her during those missing years in her file. She rose to her feet, assessing her surroundings. The cave was vast, its walls lined with the same luminescent fungi she had seen in the forest above, providing just enough light to navigate by. Tunnels branched off in multiple directions, leading deeper into Meridian 9's subsurface. Lyra removed the obsidian cube from her pocket. In the dim blue light of the fungi, it seemed to absorb all the illumination that touched it, becoming a perfect void in the shape of a cube. She closed her eyes, holding the artifact against her forehead. "Show me the path." In her mind's eye, she saw one of the tunnels illuminated, leading west towards something powerful, something ancient. The ground trembled slightly as something heavy impacted above. The Empire was coming. Lyra smiled and began moving toward the western tunnel. Everything was proceeding exactly as her mentor had planned. Lord Commander Vex landed at the bottom of the sinkhole, his armor absorbing the impact. He immediately activated his helmet's tracking systems, searching for signs of the human. "Blood trace detected," his HUD announced. "Subject heading west." Vex drew his sidearm and followed the blood trail into the western tunnel. The passageway wound downward, deeper into the planet's crust. According to Imperial surveys, Meridian 9 was supposed to be geologically stable with minimal subsurface development. Yet here was an extensive cave system that appeared to have been deliberately omitted from the records. Another uncomfortable thought to add to his growing list of concerns. After 20 minutes of careful progress, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. Vex froze at the entrance, momentarily overwhelmed by what he saw. The cavern stretched for hundreds of meters in every direction, its ceiling lost in darkness above. But it wasn't the size that stunned him. It was what filled the space. Artifacts of clearly non-imperial origin lined the walls. Strange machines, containers filled with swirling energies, and weapons unlike any in the Empire's considerable arsenal. And in the center of it all stood Lyra Novak, her back to him, the obsidian cube held aloft in her hands. It was no longer just a cube. It had unfolded somehow, its surfaces rearranging into a complex geometric pattern that emitted a pulsing red light. "Step away from the artifact, human," Vex commanded, raising his weapon. "This is your only warning." Lyra turned slowly to face him. Blood from her earlier wounds had dried on her face, forming patterns that looked disturbingly ritualistic. Her eyes seemed different, darker, with pinpricks of light like distant stars. "You're too late, Commander," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. "The beacon is active. She is coming." "Who is coming?" Vex demanded, his finger tightening on the trigger. Lyra smiled, and for a moment, Vex could have sworn her teeth looked sharper than human teeth should be. "My teacher, the one your empire fears more than death itself, the one you erased from your histories." "Enough riddles," Vex snarled. He fired his weapon, the energy blast striking Lyra directly in the chest. She stumbled backward but didn't fall. He fired again and again, each shot hitting its mark, until his weapon's charge was depleted. Lyra stood amid the dissipating energy, her body smoking but somehow intact. The wounds from his weapon began to close before his eyes. "The Baba Yaga is coming," she whispered, her voice carrying to him despite the distance between them. "And I am her herald." Before Vex could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. Cracks appeared in the cavern floor, spreading outward from where Lyra stood. The Lord Commander stumbled, trying to maintain his balance as the tremors intensified. Lyra raised the transformed cube above her head and brought it down hard against the floor. The impact sent a shockwave throughout the chamber, shattering the stone beneath their feet. The last thing Vex saw before darkness claimed him was Lyra Novak, standing impossibly on a pillar of stone as the rest of the cavern collapsed around them, her eyes blazing with ancient power. And behind her, just for a moment, he thought he saw another figure, tall and twisted, with a face that haunted the nightmares of 1,000 worlds. Then there was only darkness, the teacher's shadow. The Imperial rescue team descended into the ruins with practiced efficiency. 3 days had passed since the loss of contact with Lord Commander Vex, and High Command had finally authorized a full recovery operation. The team's leader, Captain Ilara Reeve, watched her helmet display as it mapped the collapsed cavern system below them. Life signs, she asked her second-in-command. Lieutenant Dax checked his scanner. None detected, Captain. But there's significant interference. Something's disrupting our equipment. Ilara wasn't surprised. The reports from Vex's team before communication was lost had mentioned unusual energy signatures. That, combined with the mysterious theft from the Centauri Prime Vault, had put the entire sector on high alert. Proceed with caution, she ordered as they reached the bottom of the newly drilled shaft. Priority 1 is recovering Lord Commander Vex and the artifact. The team spread out, using laser cutters to clear a path through the rubble. The cavity they entered had once been enormous, but the collapse had filled most of it with debris. Their helmet lights revealed shattered fragments of strange technology embedded in the walls and floor, technology that predated Imperial classification systems. Captain, called one of her soldiers. I found something. Ilara made her way over to where the soldier stood, pointing at what appeared to be a hand protruding from beneath a fallen slab of stone. The gleaming material of Vex's ceremonial armor was unmistakable. Get him out, she ordered. It took 4 soldiers with hydraulic lifters to move the stone. Beneath it lay the broken form of Lord Commander Vex, his ornate armor crushed and twisted around his body. His helmet had been removed and sat nearby, its faceplate shattered. But it was Vex's expression that chilled Ilara's blood. His eyes were open wide, his mouth frozen in a silent scream of absolute terror. The skin of his face had turned completely white, drained of all color, and his hair, which had been black in his service records, had become stark white as well. Is he? Lieutenant Dax couldn't finish the question. Ilara knelt and checked for signs of life. To her shock, Vex's pulse was present, though weak and irregular. He's alive. Get a medical capsule down here immediately. As her team rushed to comply, Ilara gently lifted Vex's head, hoping to make him more comfortable. His eyes suddenly focused on her face, and his hand shot up to grip her arm with surprising strength. She's coming, he rasped, his voice barely audible. The witch, the Baba Yaga, she taught the human. Our weapons had no effect. Save your strength, Commander, Ilara urged him. Medical assistance is on the way. Vex's grip tightened painfully. You don't understand, he whispered. The Empire. We built on their ruins. We stole their power. And now she knows we're here. His eyes rolled back, and he began to convulse. Ilara tried to hold him steady as foam formed at the corners of his mouth. The bones, he gasped between seizures. The Empire is built on bones, and she's come to collect. Those were his last words before he fell limp in her arms, his life signs flatlining despite the medical nanites that flooded his system. Ilara gently closed his eyes, disturbed by his final message. Captain, called another soldier from across the chamber. You need to see this. Ilara rose and crossed to where several team members had gathered around a section of the cavern wall. Unlike the rest of the natural stone, this section appeared to have been deliberately carved. Symbols and pictographs covered the surface, depicting scenes that made no sense to Ilara's imperial-educated mind. Can anyone translate? She asked. Lieutenant Dax stepped forward hesitantly. I recognize some of these symbols, Captain. They appear in the restricted archives, historical records from before the Empire. You have clearance for those archives? Ilara asked, surprised. Dax looked uncomfortable. My family served in the Imperial Archaeological Corps. I saw things I wasn't supposed to see. Under normal circumstances, such an admission would have resulted in immediate discipline. But these were not normal circumstances. What do they say, Lieutenant? Dax studied the wall carefully. It's a warning, Captain. It speaks of the time before the Empire, when humanity was confined to a single world. There was a protector of sorts, a being that guarded Earth from external threats. External threats? You mean alien species? Worse, Dax replied grimly. The text refers to entities that existed between stars. ancient powers that saw emerging civilizations as nothing more than resources to be harvested. He traced his fingers over a series of symbols that depicted a hunched figure surrounded by what appeared to be stars or lights. This figure, the Baba Yaga, as Commander Vex called her, she was humanity's defender against these entities. The text said as she taught select humans her ways, passing knowledge that was never meant for mortal minds. Superstitious nonsense, spat another officer. Primitive human myths. Ilara wasn't so sure. The Empire had encountered too many inexplicable phenomena across the galaxy to dismiss ancient warnings outright. Continue, Lieutenant. Dax moved to another section of the wall. Here it describes how the Empire's founders discovered artifacts left by the Baba Yaga. They used this technology to expand rapidly, to conquer other worlds, but they didn't understand what they were tampering with. A chill ran down Ilara's spine, and the human woman, the one Commander Vex was pursuing. According to this, Dax said slowly, the Baba Yaga occasionally selects human disciples when great dangers threaten. The text implies she exists partially outside normal spacetime, which would explain how a supposedly earthbound entity could operate across the galaxy. He hesitated. Captain, if I'm reading this correctly, the woman wasn't stealing the artifact. She was returning it. A sharp crack echoed through the chamber, causing everyone to reach for their weapons. A section of the far wall had split open, revealing a tunnel that hadn't been there moments before. Defensive positions, Ilara ordered, drawing her own sidearm. Lieutenant, continue monitoring for life signs. Her soldiers formed a semicircle facing the new opening, weapons trained on the darkness beyond. Ilara's mind raced as she tried to process what was happening. If even half of what Dax had translated was true, they were dealing with something far beyond standard Imperial threat parameters. Movement detected, announced Lieutenant Dax, his voice tight with tension. Something's coming through the tunnel. Ilara raised her hand, signaling her troops to hold fire until her command. The darkness within the tunnel seemed to deepen, to congeal into a more solid form. Then a figure emerged, a human woman walking with steady, confident steps despite the injuries that should have incapacitated her. Lyra Novak had changed since the security footage Ilara had reviewed. Her military uniform was torn and scorched, revealing skin covered in intricate patterns that resembled the symbols on the cavern walls. Her eyes reflected light like a predator's, and she moved with an inhuman grace that set Ilara's nerves on edge. Imperial forces, Lyra called out, her voice echoing strangely. You have one opportunity to leave this place. Take your wounded commander and go. This world is no longer within your jurisdiction. Ilara stepped forward. Lieutenant Commander Novak, you are wanted for theft of Imperial property and the attempted murder of Lord Commander Vex. Surrender the artifact immediately. Lyra tilted her head, studying Ilara with unsettling intensity. Your commander is dead, Captain. As for the artifact, it was never yours to begin with. The Empire built its power on stolen technology, on forces it could never truly control. Fire warning shots, Ilara ordered. Her soldiers complied, energy weapons discharging to strike the stone near Lyra's feet. The human didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, an expression that contained no warmth, only ancient patience. I gave you a chance, she said softly. Then she raised her hand, and within it was the obsidian cube, now transformed into a complex geometric shape that hurt Ilara's eyes to look at directly. Take her down, Ilara commanded. A dozen weapons fired simultaneously, energy blasts converging on Lyra's position. The air itself seemed to warp around her, the blasts bending away as if deflected by an invisible shield. Not a single shot reached its target. She taught me, Lyra said, her voice now layered with another, deeper tone that seemed to bypass Ilara's ears and resonate directly in her mind. The Baba Yaga taught me the truth about the universe, about the powers the Empire has been misusing, about what lurks between the stars, watching and waiting. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Small stones and debris rose into the air, defying gravity as energy crackled throughout the chamber. "Who are you?" Ilara demanded, fighting to keep her voice steady as primal fear threatened to overwhelm her training. "I am the Herald," Lyra replied. "The first of many. Humanity was never meant to be conquered, Captain. We were meant to be guardians." From the tunnel behind Lyra emerged another figure, and Ilara's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form seeming to shift and change with each passing second. One moment it appeared as an elderly woman with wild white hair and piercing eyes. The next as something far less human, a creature of angles and shadows that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. "The Baba Yaga," whispered Lieutenant Dax, his weapon slipping from nerveless fingers. The entity moved forward to stand beside Lyra, placing what might have been a hand on the human's shoulder. When it spoke, its voice was like the grinding of tectonic plates, ancient beyond comprehension. "I have eagerly akcahd your empire rise," it said, "built on the bones of forgotten worlds. Podui oridi by tchnologies, you nev or ear ended. I stayed in my hand, curious to see what you would be see on." Its gaze, or what passed for a gaze from a being whose form refused to settle on any consistent shape, fell upon the fallen body of Lord Commander Vex. "But you avfailed, you harvest worlds. You experiment on and Shichelduan. You seek power without understanding its cost." The entity gestured, and the walls of the chamber began to glow with the same symbols that covered Lyra's skin. Ilara's translation software struggled to keep up, fragments of meaning filtering through her helmet display. "Reclamation. Judgment. Reset. What do you want?" Ilara asked, surprised that her voice still functioned. Lyra answered for her mentor. "The Empire as you know it is ending, Captain. The Baba Yaga has awakened fully to this realm, and she has found humanity wanting. But there is hope. Not all will be lost." "Hope," Ilara repeated, bewildered. "Those who renounce the Empire's ways will be spared," Lyra explained. "Those who join us in restoring what was broken will find new purpose. The technologies the Empire has misused will be reclaimed, and proper guardianship established." The entity, the Baba Yaga, extended what might have been an arm, its form stretching across the chamber until it touched the carved wall. The symbols there flared with blinding light, and a wave of energy pulsed outward, passing through Ilara and her soldiers like a ghost. Ilara gasped as knowledge flooded her mind. Images of the early empire, of its founders discovering ancient sites, much like this one across dozens of worlds. She saw them extracting technology they didn't understand, harnessing powers that were never meant for them. She saw the true history of how the Empire had risen, not through human ingenuity as she had been taught, but through the systematic plunder of remnants left by guardians like the Baba Yaga. And she saw what waited beyond the edges of known space, entities of such cosmic horror that her mind recoiled from their very concept. Entities that the Guardians had fought to contain for eons, that saw galactic civilizations as nothing more than brief candles to be snuffed out when convenient. "The choice is yours," the Baba Yaga intoned. "Join or perish. The old Bri yours vodu ekn. The void grows hungry." Ilara looked at her soldiers, seeing the same terror and revelation in their postures that she felt herself. Then she looked at Lyra, standing calmly beside the impossible entity that had apparently been humanity's secret protector since before recorded history. Slowly, deliberately, Ilara lowered her weapon. "What would you have us do?" 1 year later, High Admiral Ilara Reeve stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned vessel Baba Yaga's Promise, watching as the shipyards of New Earth turned out vessels unlike any the former empire had ever produced. Ships designed not for conquest, but for defense against threats most of humanity still couldn't comprehend. "The perimeter stations are fully operational," reported Captain Dax, approaching with a data slate. The outer colonies have all transitioned to the new protocols. Ilara nodded, satisfied. The transition had not been easy. Many Imperial loyalists had resisted, unable to accept the truth about their civilization's foundations. But enough had seen the visions, had understood the greater threat that loomed beyond the stars. "And the academies?" she asked. "The first class of Guardians completes their training next month," Dax replied. "Lyra has been an demanding instructor." Ilara smiled slightly at that. Lyra Novak, once a fugitive from Imperial justice, now stood as humanity's chief defender, the first publicly acknowledged disciple of the Baba Yaga in recorded history. Her methods were harsh, but necessarily so. What she was preparing them for left no room for weakness. "Any word from the outer scouts?" Ilara asked, turning her attention to the holographic display that showed the borders of former Imperial space, now designated as protected territory. Dax's expression grew serious. 3 more incursions detected in the Perseus sector. "Whatever's out there, it's getting more aggressive." Ilara wasn't surprised. The Baba Yaga had warned them this would happen. As humanity reclaimed its proper role as cosmic guardians, the entities that had been waiting in the darkness between stars would test their defenses, probing for weaknesses. "Alert Lyra," she ordered. "Tell her we need more Guardians deployed to Perseus immediately." As Dax hurried to comply, Ilara returned her gaze to the shipyards. Strange how quickly everything had changed. A year ago, she had been a loyal Imperial captain, certain of her place in a mighty civilization that spanned the stars. Now that Empire was gone, transformed into something new, something older and more purposeful than the conquest-driven regime it had been. And somewhere out there, watching over them all, was the entity they now acknowledged openly, the Baba Yaga, humanity's ancient teacher and protector. Not a myth or legend, but something far more complex, a guardian that had hidden in plain sight throughout human history, preparing them for the role they were always meant to play. Ilara touched the symbol now emblazoned on her uniform, the same geometric pattern that had once been the obsidian cube, the mark of the Guardians. The stars seemed different to her now, their light less comforting and more urgent. Between them lurked dangers few humans had ever comprehended, entities that had watched and waited while the Empire expanded, harvesting technologies it was never meant to possess. But humanity was awakening to its true purpose. The Baba Yaga had returned, bringing with her knowledge long forgotten. And Lyra Novak, the woman who had survived the Empire's best efforts to kill her, now led a new generation of Guardians, humans who understood that their species had always been meant for something greater than conquest. The war for the galaxy's survival had only just begun, but for the first time in centuries, humanity was fighting on the right side. A proximity alert chimed, drawing Ilara's attention to a small craft approaching the ship. It was Lyra's personal vessel, returning from the training grounds on Meridian 9, the planet where everything had changed. Ilara straightened her uniform and prepared to receive her superior officer. There was much to discuss, much to plan. The entities beyond the stars were growing bolder, and humanity's transformed forces would soon face their greatest test. But they would not face it alone. The Baba Yaga had taught them well, and the galaxy would never be the same again.